Green light. There we go. Okay. Hello, everyone. Nice to see many familiar names and faces. Thank you all for being here. I am delighted to welcome you to our One Bite at a Time series. This is led by our own Megan Laszlo. For those of you that don't know Megan yet, I hope many of you do already. She comes to us originally from Atlanta, Georgia, if I recall. She's been an expert in the oncology nutrition space for a long time, like over 12 or 13 years at this point. And I think we're delighted and lucky to have her because she also has a background as a chef. And when you could really marry those two skill sets, I think it's a big boon for us and our community. We designed this One Bite at a series to be short. So these were meant to be 20, 30-minute modules because we don't want to overwhelm you with or bombard you with too much information at one time. But we think that all the topics that Megan has brought to us as really important as it relates to cancer survivorship, cancer wellness, and our overall health and our nutrition. So we take little topics and take a deep dive. Today's topic is delving into the realm of the microbiome and strategies in which what we eat can enhance the microbiome. Unless you've been under a rock, everyone here knows that the microbiome has been associated with virtually every health outcome, from our cognitive health and brain health to even, many people believe, even maybe for oncologic health. So I'm going to hand it over to her. Again, I'll say this again. Megan puts a lot of time and thought and effort into packaging these modules together. So I want to thank her once now. I'll thank her again at the end. And as we mentioned earlier before we started recording, we are here in person, and we'll be able to sample whatever Megan puts together for us if you are able to come in the future. Megan, thanks for doing this. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Y'all should be able to see that. And we are recording, but we never include anyone's name or video when we send this out. So just it's good to be aware of that. So thank you so much. Dr. Asher contributes a lot to these topic ideas. So I appreciate all your great ideas that you bring forward. And today, the focus is specifically on strategies to enhance gut microbiome diversity and eubiosis. And if you're not familiar with the word eubiosis, it's the opposite of dysbiosis. So it's where the number of beneficial bacteria are exceeding the number of pathogenic bacteria. I can drive. There we go. And so when we think about our gut microbiota, we usually talk about it having bacteria, but it's really this whole ecosystem of microbes. And we have microbes that colonize our entire bodies, but they're especially concentrated within the gut, within the colon. And our gut microbiome has many different functions. We're going to highlight some of the most important ones. As a protective function where it helps clear out pathogens, and the good bacteria can limit the bad bacteria or keep it in check. It also is very much involved in immune system development. Oops, go back. And regulation. And we talk a lot about epithelial barrier integrity. And this is really talking about the lining within our intestinal lumen, where we want to have these tight, healthy, tight junctions that help keep pathogens and toxins from leaving our intestinal tract and entering into the bloodstream. So you hear a lot about gut barrier integrity. That's what it's talking about. And then the immune system is also involved with immunoglobulin A, which is secreted in the gut as well. And our gut microbiome also has metabolic functions. It's involved with nutrient absorption, specifically with calcium, B vitamins, and vitamin K. It helps regulate different metabolic pathways. It helps mobilize bile for fat digestion. And it also ferments fiber and fermentable carbohydrates and produces short chain fatty acids and gas. And these short chain fatty acids include butyrate, acetate, propionate, and they've been known to enhance the gut barrier, provide immunomodulation, protect against pathogens, and coordinate communication between the gut and the immune system. And I like to think of our gut microbiome as having like us having this symbiotic relationship with it. And a good example of this is the suckerfish and the shark. And the suckerfish eats parasites off the shark's skin that could harm the shark. And then the shark in turn protects the suckerfish and gives it transportation. And they have these mutualistic interactions, right? And we have this with our gut microbiome. We provide the suitable environment, the right temperature, the right pH, the right moisture, nutrients. And in turn, our gut microbiome fulfills these different important functions and also appears to influence our eating habits and our brains. And this communication is done through the gut-brain axis and primarily through the vagus nerve, which is the longest nerve in the body and forms the most direct link between the gut and the brain. And this communication occurs through nerves, hormone signals, and metabolic and immune routes. And there's increasing evidence that our microbiome affects our mood, our cognition, and even our behavior. But I wanted to shift and talk a little bit about the gut microbiome in oncology. So I want to highlight a few important studies that have come out in the past several years. One is that the gut microbiome regulates estrogen through the secretion of beta glucuronidase enzymes or GUS enzymes. And these enzymes allow for more estrogen to be recirculated into the body. And this is a bad thing for individuals with estrogen receptor positive breast cancers, right? And we know that high fiber intake decreases GUS activity and lowers estrogen reabsorption. So fiber is a good thing here, GUS is a bad thing. There's also evidence that a plant-based diet increases microbiome diversity, which is a good thing, and lowers estrogen levels. And that women with triple negative breast cancer that responded to anthracycline-based chemotherapy like adriamycin or Doxil had higher diversity and species richness within their gut. And these are all human studies that I want to highlight. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about preclinical data. Another study showed that patients with colorectal cancer that consumed higher amounts of fiber after diagnosis had substantially lower rates of death. And individuals with melanoma that had high prebiotic fiber intake had better responses to immunotherapy with immune checkpoint inhibitors compared to those on a low fiber diet. And some examples of immune checkpoint inhibitors are nivolumab, pembrolizumab, and others. And that a high fiber diet was also associated with better clinical outcomes in patients with metastatic lung cancer on immunotherapy. So we're starting to see this association between fiber intake, gut diversity, and improved treatment outcomes. And I think we'll see more of this in the future as well. But I just wanted to highlight some of these studies because I think anytime we can improve treatment outcomes, we certainly want to. And diet is a very modifiable factor. That said, there are multiple factors that can impact the gut microbiome. And we see these highlighted up here. And others include even exercise, hydration, and there's even some evidence that spending time outdoors can positively impact the gut and reduce stress. But because our food choices are so modifiable, they're an easy and accessible way to support gut health. I think it's important to keep in mind that our microbiota do have the capacity to restore equilibrium after antibiotics or after chemotherapy. But today we really want to focus on diet and also pro and prebiotics. So to just get started talking about diet, I wanted to briefly review our dietary guidelines for cancer risk reduction and also survivorship. And they're really to eat a diet that's rich in whole grains, vegetables, fruit, beans, nuts, seeds, and to limit fast food and other highly processed foods that are high in fat, starches, or sugar, to limit red and processed meat, and also sugary drinks. But I want to offer some additional guidance that supports gut health. I know we talk about fiber a lot in here because fiber is very important. It's a non-digestible carbohydrate and also includes lignans that occur naturally in plants. And the recommended amount from the American Institute for Cancer Research is 30 grams per day. And this is higher than the amount recommended by USDA, which they recommend 25 to 28. And the reason is because there's good evidence to support this amount. And I think this is a good recommendation to talk with your registered dietitian about and to look at yourself when you are analyzing your diet and food choices, if you're using any kind of software to track your food intake, I think this is a good thing to check in on if you have a body that can tolerate fiber. You know, some individuals do have a fiber restriction, and of course, I'm not trying to take away from that or suggest that you do something other than what your body needs. But if you are someone that can tolerate fiber, I think this is a good goal to have. And so dietary fiber includes both soluble and insoluble fiber. Soluble fiber is soluble in water, it has a gelling effect. Insoluble fiber is not soluble in water, it has a bulking effect. And you can see different food sources within these. I've also included fiber supplement sources within these as well, like cellulose and psyllium. And prebiotic fiber is a type of soluble fiber. And prebiotic fiber is the fuel for probiotics. So it's like kind of like food for the healthy bacteria. And so probiotics are alive, active bacteria that can be either found in a probiotic dietary supplement or foods that are considered like dietary probiotics, like yogurt, for example. I think it's important to distinguish between those two sources. This is another study I wanted to highlight. It's the American Gut Project. And they found that the number of plant types you eat plays a role in the diversity of the gut microbiome. So diverse diet, diverse gut microbiome. And their study, the participants that ate greater than 30 different plant types per week had microbiomes that were more diverse than those that ate 10 or fewer. And they found that fiber supplements like psyllium fiber, brand name Metamucil, didn't have the same effect on increasing gut microbiome diversity. And so I think it's important to think about diversifying your food intake. Dietitians will say this pretty frequently. You want to think about eating the rainbow, and that means exposing yourself to lots of different sources of nutrients, but also lots of different sources of fiber. And there seems to be a benefit to this. And, you know, I think having all of these different sources aiming for a wide variety may help counter some of the negative effects of ultra-processed food or convenience foods. Additionally, I think it's also important to focus on what's in season. Right now in Southern California, these foods are in season. They're going to be at their peak freshness. They're going to be at the best cost. So I think these are some things to pay attention to as they start to come out and really just enjoy what's in season, what's fresh, what's local. So we'll talk a little bit about fermented foods. And the fermented foods are produced through controlled microbial growth. And this is like a delicate process. And the sour flavor in fermented foods comes from the fermentation, not from the addition of vinegar. And this is what distinguishes them from pickles. These fermented foods do appear to increase gut microbiome diversity, and they appear to work synergistically with high fiber intake, which may help ultimately lead to decreased inflammation in the body. And there's also evidence to support their use for increasing intestinal barrier function, those tight junctions I mentioned earlier. And I think fermented foods are generally safe for most individuals. They do have some byproducts of fermentation like alcohol and amines, which may be important to consider. But generally the alcohol content is quite low. I think it's also interesting and important to distinguish the difference between fermented foods that have live microbes in them versus fermented foods where the microbes are killed or removed. And most fermented foods don't meet the definition of a probiotic. So for something to be called a probiotic, you have to define which bacterial strains are there and the number of colony forming units that are guaranteed to be in that product for the duration of its shelf life. So things like yogurt or kefir, if you look at the label, you can see it has, lactobacillus acidophilus and how many billions of colony forming units it has. Or something like miso, you don't have that on the label. So there are differences there. And then you can see here something like bread, like sourdough bread, the live microbes are killed when the bread is cooked, right? But usually sourdough is chosen because the fermentation process lowers the content of fermentable carbohydrates, and this makes it more useful for individuals choosing it to reduce GI symptoms and IBS, for example. But sometimes at farmers markets, I hear a lot of advertising about sourdough bread and it being a probiotic, and I just think, we're not really getting live active bacteria from this food. So I wanted to highlight a few different supplements that are used for gut health. One is probiotics. There's a lot of research about probiotics. But I think it's important to point out that probiotics in general, probiotic dietary supplements are not recommended for just generalized improvement in gut health. There doesn't seem to be any evidence that that is something that we should all just take. I don't think there's any evidence that we should all just take a probiotic supplement to improve gut health. I think there's benefit of consuming probiotic containing foods, but what we need to realize with the probiotics is that colonization in the lower GI tract is highly variable. When we take a probiotic, we don't know what's going to stick around and proliferate in our gut. And a lot of the evidence with probiotics shows that they really don't stick around. And that's why when they are taken, they need to be taken daily because they don't stick. There is evidence for specific bacteria for specific conditions. So I think that's worth looking at. If you type in US probiotic guide into a search engine, you can pull up some of that information if you're interested, or talk with your dietitian about it. And there was an article I saw regarding the immunotherapy treatment outcomes with fiber intake, and they found that probiotics actually worsened the gut microbiome diversity and worsened immunotherapy response in preclinical models, and that probiotics were associated with poor outcomes in observational immunotherapy studies. So I think that's something really important to consider, especially if you're trying to use probiotics as an adjunct to cancer-directed therapy. It's like, do they offer a benefit, or could they actually have a harmful effect? And the research is all over the place. So I think it's good to really look at your individual needs and what the research shows for it. Another one is psyllium fiber. The psyllium fiber is a type of soluble fiber. It's usually sold as like Metamucil is one of the brands. It's not fermented by gut bacteria, but there is some evidence that shows that it may improve the health of the gut microbiome, especially if you're using it to manage constipation or diarrhea. So it can be useful for that, but I wouldn't suggest taking psyllium to meet that recommended amount of fiber, that 30 grams per day. And then another supplement I wanted to highlight is butyrate. So we're seeing more of this. So butyrate is one of the short chain fatty acids that our gut bacteria produce when they ferment fiber. And then it's also being sold as a dietary supplement. And there's some really interesting preclinical data showing that it may enhance chemo efficacy in colorectal cancer and some other great studies. But again, that's still preclinical, so it's not at the point where we would be recommending this. And there's some small studies that show that it may reduce symptoms of IBS, but really more research is needed. I think it's more beneficial to feed our gut bacteria fiber that it likes and have that process take place in the way that it normally happens. Wanted to briefly talk about some of the impact of sugars and sugar substitutes on the gut microbiota. This is a question I get asked about a lot. So to summarize a lot of the information on sugar and sugar substitutes, we can go through this chart. So on our left, we have different sources of sugar. We have glucose, which can be found in fruit and other sources, and it increases bifidobacteria. This is a good bacteria in your GI tract, and it decreases bacteroides, which are bad bacteria. Fructose, same thing. Fructose is in fruit, increases good bacteria, decreases bad bacteria. Sucrose and table sugar, same thing. Lactose also has that effect, also reduces Clostridia, which could be good or bad, and lactobacilli, which is good. And then artificial sweeteners have been shown to decrease our good bacteria and increase bad bacteria or pathogenic bacteria. And so I think that's an important consideration with sugars. And in general, we want to think about avoiding these non-nutritive, low-calorie, artificial, alternative sweeteners, and instead choose these others that do contain sugar, do contain calories. And one of the reasons was in 2023, the World Health Organization just came out and said not to use non-sugar sweeteners to control body weight or reduce the risk of non-communicable diseases. And this is largely because of its negative effects on the gut microbiome. So I wanted to summarize some information. So thinking about the diet, our diet and gut health, these plant-based foods provide energy for the cells in our intestines. They also help keep us full after a meal. Fiber helps keep us full. We know that fiber is feeding our gut microbes. It's feeding the bacteria that like us, that have established themselves in our body. It also helps maintain a healthy balance of bacteria and can help protect the mucus layer of the GI tract. And I think it's important to remember that diversity is very important in our diet and leads to a diverse gut microbiome. And so some of the things that we can do to support our gut health or think about making meals at home. When we cook at home, we have a lot more control over what we're eating. Our diets are generally healthier than they would be if we ate out or ate to-go food. And I think it's just an interesting practice and it appears to support gut microbiome diversity to try to eat 30 different plants per week. And just kind of assess, like, how many different plants am I eating per week? If you're someone that buys a large volume of food at like Costco and then you end up having an apple every day, is that serving you as much as diversifying it and having an apple one day, grapes the next day, and orange the next day, and trying to get a wide variety? And thinking about how many servings of fruits and vegetables you are having on a daily basis. If you were to measure this out in household measures, this comes out to about 2.5 cups. So there's some variation there. If you have a very large piece of fruit or a vegetable, it might actually count for 2 servings. So that's something to think about as well. And I would argue that you should have plant-based protein in your meals on a daily basis. I think having beans on a daily basis is a very healthful food choice. And we want to include fermented foods regularly. Because again, even with fermented foods, those live active bacteria, we don't know what's going to stick around and proliferate in our guts. They are something that appear to have the most benefit when consumed on a regular basis. I think it's important to keep in mind that fiber intake, the recommended amount for fiber is 30 grams per day. If you are going to count something, I think that is a valuable metric to assess for your diet. And this is the recipe I wanted to share with y'all. This is overnight oats. Sorry. This is a very simple recipe to make, but these ratios, they are quite thick. If you like it a little bit thinner, you could add more milk of choice, whatever you'd like to include. But what I like about this is it has good sources of soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. If you look at this fiber content, this recipe yields 12 grams. This was estimated with the fruit being blackberries, which are one of our higher fiber containing fruits and are in season. And so, yes, I think this is very balanced, makes for a really great breakfast or a snack, especially now that the weather's getting hotter. It's nice to have something cold. This is something to think about and start looking at this fiber content here. All of our recordings from One Bite at a Time and our other Wellness, Resilience, and Survivorship lecture series are all up on Cedars Sinai Cancer YouTube. You can check them out with that link here if you'd like to look at any of our past talks. And I wanted to include this as well. So this highlights our specialty programs here at Cedars Sinai Cancer. We have all these wonderful programs. We have a cooking program. There's an exercise recovery program, yoga, art therapy, and we're a nonprofit organization. And if you would like to contribute to our programs, these are all donor funded. So if you'd like to contribute and support our programs, they are free to patients, and you can contribute here using this link.
Great. Thank you so much, Megan. This is the part where we can open it up for questions. If you want to raise your hand or type it in the chat. I know Diana, our dietitian, has also been kindly answering some of the questions. I'm going to start just since I have the mic for the moment, and then we'll look for questions in the chat. But Megan, one question I get occasionally is, let's say sauerkraut or whatever fermented food we're talking about. As far as you know, does it matter if I have it on an empty stomach or with a meal or with fat or without fat?
I have not read anything that indicates that you have to have it with another food component to improve survival of the bacteria that you're consuming. I think it's a great thing to incorporate. We would rarely just eat sauerkraut or a fermented vegetable by itself. We'd usually include it in other
Yeah, it
things.
doesn't sound very good, but I believe it or not, there are people that I've heard do that. Not with any evidence as far as I know, just thinking it's the first thing I'd eat in the morning. And I've heard that anecdotally. I just didn't know if there was any evidence behind it.
I have not. I'm not saying
Doesn't
that there
sound
isn't
appealing.
any.
Okay, because you did say, there are synergies with, fermented foods and fiber, but I assume you mean that to be as in a comprehensive diet as a whole, or did you mean in a meal it's nice to have some broccoli and some kimchi at the same time?
I don't think it's important to pair them at the same time. I think just throughout the day, like trying to get to that recommended fiber intake throughout the day by eating a wide variety of like beans and berries and nuts and seeds and whole grains, but then also regularly incorporating those fermented foods. And there was a long list up there. I mean, it doesn't just include fermented vegetables, it could be yogurt, it could be kefir, even cheese. I mean, a lot of these things do have live active bacteria in them.
Great. Okay. I could go on with more questions, but I'm looking for hands. So I see Victoria, I see your hand, and then Julia, you'll be next. Victoria, go ahead.
Okay, I was the one that asked questions about I have ulcerative colitis, and I've been to GI doctors. I've tried probiotics, prebiotics, fermented foods. It's really difficult also having the allergies. And I'm wondering what kind of probiotic to do that is not dairy based. I know, can kefir come in a non-dairy based? And I'm also interested in the natto. And since I have so many allergies, I have broccoli and like everything has to be cooked down really, get the sugars down, and it's problematic trying to figure out what I'm going to eat and what's not going to trigger me and throw me in the toilet all night long. So I'm just wondering if you guys had some insight that I
Well,
didn't have.
let's see what Megan says. I do want to say I agree with Diana 100%. It would be wise, if you haven't already, to try to find a dietitian that specializes in
I
um,
have one, but she's not that great.
okay. I will give a generic comment and then I'm gonna let Megan to see if she has any general thoughts. Just so you know, you're asking about dairy. Things like miso and natto are soy fermented foods, so they may not have,
I have an allergy to that.
yeah. Megan,
I have an allergy to soy too.
yeah. So so again, and Megan said this, not everyone tolerates beans or every food that she talks about. So I think I would take all of that in context for our own situations, but Megan, other general thoughts you can share?
No, I agree. I mean, I think everyone is an individual and we have our individualized needs. And I think when you are working with something like an inflammatory bowel issue and it's something that waxes and wanes, you have to kind of go with that. And when you are having a flare up, cut back on fiber. I mean, and anything your body doesn't tolerate. So I think it is very important to honor what your body needs and to seek out the help so that you can have someone actually go through your different food choices with you. There are non-dairy yogurts and kefir that are available.
Yeah.
It might be looking at them, but
Any
the
recommendations?
might be different because some of the probiotics just like dairy, like lactobacillus, but they do have probiotic. There's cultured cashew milk and
Any
coconut.
recommendation for the kefir? Like what kind of product to buy for kefir? Because I'm at my wit's end.
I would go to like a specialty health food store and just look for something that meets your needs with your food allergies and intolerances and just try to see what you can find. But
Okay.
I like the creaminess of cashew and coconut personally for a non-dairy alternative.
Okay. Cashew or coconut, you said.
Thank you very much. I'm gonna go
Okay,
to
great.
Julia.
Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. I'm gonna go to Julia and then I'm gonna go off through some of the questions in the chat. Julia, you're next.
So I saw that to not count flaxseed or psyllium as part of your added fibers. Is that right? Um,
So
because I'm trying to throw flaxseed or chia seed into my protein shake. Does that not count in the
yeah.
total amount of fiber for your daily intake?
Definitely count the flax seed, the chia seed, the hemp seed. Yeah, definitely count those. And I don't want to say that the soluble fiber supplement like psyllium doesn't count. I think it does count. But I just wouldn't want individuals relying on that to meet a good portion of that recommendation when I think that there's so much more benefit to getting fiber from whole foods that also provide other valuable nutrients as well and appear to have the most benefit for gut health. Whereas the psyllium seems to have some benefit, but we know that it doesn't increase gut microbiome diversity and it's not fermentable. But your chia seeds count, your flax seeds count.
Megan, I'm going to read a few questions from the chat. I think these would be like more like points of clarification. So you recommended fermented foods. Did those without live microbes count towards that?
I think they still have health benefits. We did a talk here on vinegar and noticed a lot of health benefit to consuming acid that's in vinegar or pickles that are made with vinegar. So I think, whatever it takes to get those fruits and vegetables in, if pickled is appealing to you and you like that, I still think it has health benefits. But if you're specifically wanting fermented foods with live active bacteria, that's why I provided that list. And so that's going to be things like the fermented vegetables rather than pickled vegetables, or miso or tempeh rather than soybeans, for example.
Great. Another individual asked, for added fiber, can you add raw rolled oats to a yogurt fruit nut smoothie that you're going to eat right away?
Can you add rolled oats to your smoothie?
And I think the recipe that you had, I'm not sure if this is what the question was. It was like you wait 3 days. I guess the question is, can you eat it?
Oh,
I think that's-
yeah. I mean, so with the idea with overnight oats is that you, instead of cooking them and heating them up, you're just allowing them to hydrate with whatever liquid you add to them so that they get soft and easy to eat. If you blend it in a smoothie, then it breaks down that fiber. Fiber is still there. It just breaks down into smaller particles and just makes it easier to consume immediately. But you can definitely add rolled oats to a smoothie, or if you're doing this method, you could cook them, you could heat it up and it would be ready instantly, or you could allow them to soak overnight to hydrate and then it'll make them soft.
I think you answered this already, but somebody asked a question about recommendations for someone who's post antibiotics, post chemotherapy. Maybe they were neutropenic as a result of their chemotherapy, restoring gut health. I mean, I think your general presentation answered that, but any other specific guidance?
I mean, I wish we had really tailored individual guidance for this, and we don't, but I think that there is a benefit to just slowly adding fiber in. And I didn't mention this earlier, but I think when you are adding fiber in and you haven't been having it for a while, let's say are having a flare up, you're having negative GI reactions to treatment, it's important to slowly add it in. Otherwise, you will get bloated and gassy and uncomfortable. So it's something you want to add in, slowly titrate in over a couple weeks' time, trying to get up to that 30-gram amount. And your body will adjust to that. I hear a lot of folks saying, oh, every time I eat beans, I get so gassy, I can't eat it, I don't want it. And I think it's something you have to titrate in slowly, and you will have less of a negative response over time. And it's important to drink lots of water when you're adding more fiber too. And that's something to always keep in mind. More fiber, more water.
Otherwise, you could become constipated, I think is what she's getting at. So be careful. Okay.
Thanks.
It's come up a couple times in the chat, and maybe you could just give a high level overview of probiotics versus prebiotics.
Okay, so prebiotics are basically fuel for probiotics. They provide a nutrient. They're a type of fiber. And then probiotics are the live active bacteria. And so prebiotics feed probiotics. You could think of it that way. And I think most of a lot of research was placed on probiotics and still is, but I think there's a lot of value into giving your own body, feeding yourself prebiotics so that you can feed your own gut microbiome. You can feed the bacteria that likes you and has attached to you over time. And when we add a probiotic in, we don't know what's going to stick around. It may serve us, it may not. But I think, in thinking about recovering from antibiotics and other issues, we do want to feed our own bacteria, and our gut has the ability to regenerate itself and recover from chemotherapy and recover from antibiotics. But I think we need to do it with fiber more than probiotics.
Okay, I love the image of all the different fruits and vegetables. Somebody asked about where they can find that list of how they can incorporate 30 different fruits or vegetables. And I'm going to add a question to her question, which would you count, in my mind I would, but would you count herbs and spices as part of that diversity, or are you limiting it to fruits and vegetables?
Yeah, I would. I mean, I think especially herbs, see those as like a lot of times like a leafy green almost, just depending on how much you're using. But yeah, and I mean, in thinking about like how to get more, I like dishes that have a wide variety of different plants in them. Thinking about like a vegetable soup or a stir fry, or even this example of the overnight oats. We've got oats, we've got nut butter, we've got seeds, we've got berries. You know, we're having a wide variety of different things and not just having just one type of food or one type of vegetable or fruit.
The next question had to do with kombucha. And how would you know if one kombucha product is better than another? And I would like to know that too, because this is too graphic. I've puked on a bad batch of kombucha from, when I think it was Whole Foods or something. So any guidance for us? And I stopped consuming it after that, so I never went back.
Had a bad experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think we do know. I think, it's one of those things where they don't have to put which bacteria is, and it's not really considered a probiotic. I personally like it a lot because I think it's a great like wine alternative because it's acidic, it's bubbly. But I don't think I'm unsure as to which ones are better and whether or not there is consistency among batches from the same manufacturers or distributors. I think it's a hard question to answer.
Fair enough. So to follow up on the prebiotic and probiotic question, is the goal to have them each day? I mean, I don't know if it needs to be specific to every single day, but tell me what you think. Is it just generally as a part of a comprehensive diet to try to be inclusive for both, or do you think every single day we should aim to have both?
I think every single day we should aim to have fiber for sure. And so fiber is a prebiotic. And a wide variety of fiber. Thinking about fiber diversity, we don't want just the prebiotic fibers on that list, right? We want to get all different types of fibers throughout the day. And there isn't good guidance on probiotic containing foods and how often we should have them. I think if you are counting on getting other essential nutrients from these foods, something like yogurt or kefir, that could be included daily to help meet your calcium need, right? If you are someone that consumes dairy. So I think that there's, it's good to still get a variety of those foods, but there's no clear guideline on how often or how much of probiotic foods we should be consuming. And also there's so much variation in those foods to begin with. So it's really hard to nail it down and say like, oh, you should have, fermented carrots every single day. That guidance doesn't exist.
Fair enough. The final question, I think it's to follow up an earlier point. Do dried herbs like dill, parsley, etc., count as the weekly 30 plant foods?
I mean, I would count them. They're a plant, they're dried. I mean, I would count a frozen vegetable as well, or a canned vegetable too. I mean, I think we don't want to overly limit it, but I do think that there is a health benefit to consuming herbs even when dried.
Okay, we actually went over because we had so many great questions. I want to thank Megan one more time. We've got to have a virtual round of applause for Megan for leading this. I want to thank Diana in the background for answering questions. None of this would be possible without Lachey organizing this and keeping us on track and keeping all of our programs alive. So if you're still there, Lachey, thank you. And thank you all for joining. You're all the reasons why we do this. So thank you for being a part of this. And we hope to see you at the next one in about
July 10th.
July 10th.
July 10th, and we're going to talk about diet and supplements for hair and nails.
That should be a popular one. Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank